Sulfur's another one that's kind of nice. So in evaporites, you will pick up your gypsum and your anhydrite. So here's one example. Here's our conventional logs. We are over then in Hamilton County. We're looking above the chase group. Over here we've got the gamma ray. These guys here then are picking up anhydrite beds. See the density starting to streak off in this direction. That's picking up interbedded anhydrites then with shales. That's what that's about. Here's the corresponding geochemical log. So see dry weight aluminum out here, silicon, calcium, sulfur. See there's the sulfur curve. That's picking up the anhydrite beds very easily. Titanium also picking that up as well. So essentially they've got a crystal, just like for example a gamma ray log has a scintillation crystal. Well yeah, this has a crystal that will actually measure out those captured gamma rays. Okay, we'll look at another sequence. We are now in the Fort Riley, so we're finally down in the chase group. So we look at our logs, we see caliper, pretty nice on gauge. And we see the gamma ray, and we've already seen how these carbonates in the chase group, is this shale or is this picking up uranium? And a lot of this will in fact be uranium rather than shale content. And we can kind of suspect that because we say, ooh, look at this. That looks like a shale according to the gamma ray log. And we look at the photoelectric curve and we say, if that's a shale, why isn't it pulling down to what we'd expect to see for shale? So we don't have to run exotic logs. Very often we can tell from these ones here. So fundamentally it says, yeah, it's kind of more or less a limestone, but it's getting rather dolomitic up here. That's dropping, and also you can see the neutrons reading higher than one. So we get a lot of interpretation directly from our conventional logs. Now I think it was it was Pioneer who ran this for reasons known to themselves. This is the equivalent now, where now with the processing of aluminum, that'll tell us then where our clays are. So here's the clay in the shale above. And of course the shales here that you see in the chase group, they're loaded up with other stuff. Then you could call them shales, but there's a lot of other crud in it. You can see silica, so it's a highly silty shale. Those are those red shales you see in the chase. And that's coming out nicely. It says carbonate right there. And then also you have some anhydrite. There's these little spikes here. So there is some anhydritic material within that carbonate, which is of course what you see if you take core. And actually they did run a spectral gamma on this. So now all is revealed, and we see that, yeah, that lower part here, that's a massive uranium spike at the bottom. If we look at the thorium and the potassium, they're pretty much flatlining and say there's not much in terms of clay content, which is what the geochemical logs told us already. This is from that hole we looked at earlier down in Barber County. We're matching up then what we see for the image log against what came from the spectrolith processing of the elements. So the silver is the clay from aluminum, quartz from silicon. Pyrite, well, that's picked up by both iron and sulfur, and here's the carbonate from the calcium. So that's the geochemical processing from the log of that gas shale. And here's the breakdown then in terms of using everything. This is the Schlumberger process thing, where we are looking at, let's see, illite and chlorite, so they're partitioning it between clay type. They're figuring out where the kerogen is. They're getting a phosphate. I have no idea how to do that one. And over here we have silicon, and then we've got the bound water, the free water, and the gas. So this is processing everything. Geochemical logs, neutron density, resistivity, throwing the whole thing together. And the exotic logs then have been run a lot then in the gas shales because everybody's trying to find how these things operate. So the school of thought now, I think, is we can back off a little bit and see if we can get good estimates of both the absorbed gas and the free gas from a more conventional logging suite. But we're still at the stage of trying to figure out what's going on, and it's made more complex because apparently people say there are gas shales and gas shales, that the barnett is different from the woodford and so on. So we're still on a learning curve of trying to get to grips with the shales, but there have been some cases where people say just run the logs and we'll see if we can make sense of what's going on.
From On that type of log, can you make an estimate of the organic content of the shale?
Yeah. The easiest way, if it's there, is taking the gamma ray itself, that sometimes there's a very strong correlation between kerogen and gamma ray. And so you can calibrate for that. So, but the issues then on working with the gas is you've got two gases to work with. You've got the free gas that's in whatever pore space is there, and you've got the absorbed gas. And you can get the free gas out by doing conventional log analysis, where you do a shaly sandstone equation. So out there they do something simple, either cement, do water, whatever. The trick is getting the amount of absorbed gas, and that apparently depends on the Langmuir equation or what have you. Fundamental thing with these gas shales, it's a real problem. And that is, in this particular well, they did get some gas production, but it died out pretty quickly. And the issue then was not the logs, but just simply the maturity of that shale. If you go down in Oklahoma, those shales have got cooked, so that you have moved beyond the oil window into the gas window. So your first issue then, if you're going to drill, is to find a gas shale that has gas in it rather than is loaded with organics. The issue with the gas shales, they point out to it, you have a rock which is simultaneous the seal and the source and the reservoir. It's a brand new world. But if you are dealing with gas shale that's too shallow, it never got cooked or anything. So you've got a lot of organics there, but no gas. If you go a little deeper where it gets cooked, you're going to move into the wet window and you're going to see some oil. Well, how much is your oil going to be produced? Some people feel if you're in the kind of wet window that your oil actually starts to clog up the pores and does stop the gas. And as you go down further, that's when you start to finally move into a gas window and you say, this is where we should be drilling in this shale. So down in Oklahoma, Brian Cadott, for example, has done a lot of mapping of vitrinite reflectance to show where the good zones are. But as you move up in the Southern Kansas Shelf, you're really iffy, or right, it's getting a little shallow then of pulling it off. So I don't want to be pessimistic about it. It's just one of these things we're still trying to winkle at to see if we can do as well as they do down at Oklahoma. Somebody will, but they have to get that lucky break. So anyhow, that showed kind of a review of exotic logging, and I try to sell you on the idea then how that information could be integrated. There are times when you decide to run it. If you've got enough money to spend on core, then why not do money then on exotic logging?